You know, there's a moment that happens. It happens every year in the life of the church. And we don't always talk about it. It's not Christmas Eve. It's not Easter Sunday. It's actually the Sunday after Easter. And let's be honest, last Sunday was a lot. It was great, right? There was extra services, extra people, extra energy, just extra everything. The music was full, the space was full, and the moment really mattered. We proclaimed Christ is risen, right? We kept saying it over and over again, and we meant it when we said it. But then, I don't know about you, but Monday came. Did Monday come for all of you? Yep, Monday came. And I'll be honest, there's always a moment for me in that transition of 6 weeks prepping, 6 weeks moving, 6 weeks going, and somewhere between that last service ending and the start of the week, when everything just starts to get quiet. But it isn't like a gradual quiet. It's just like that last service ends, the door shuts. Then what, right? We're there. And then sometimes I'll get inside my brain there a little bit, and I'm like, did it even matter? Did this matter? And I'm not talking about the service itself. I'm not talking even about the message, but the message really about the hope. The message about truth that we just proclaimed. Because it's one thing to say for us, Christ is risen, especially in a room full of people, right? You feel the energy, you feel it inside of you. But it's another thing to carry it into a regular day when nothing feels any different. Was your Monday any special? Mine wasn't. It was full of meetings and everything else like a normal every Monday would be. And maybe you've had moments like that where something meaningful happens, something real, something you have just been through and like, wow. And then life keeps moving. Like they don't get like what you've just been through. And you're just left wondering like, what am I supposed to do with this? I just had this great experience. And if you're like me, you're looking at your calendar wondering, okay, what just happened? We just been through this thing. But what am I supposed to do now? Because the world didn't pause. Like me, I'm sure your emails were still there, right? Meetings were still scheduled. Life is still life, the way it happens. And there's a strange shift that happens because, and I should say not because the resurrection wasn't real, and it's not because the hope wasn't true, but it was because the moment passed, and we're just left trying to figure out how to live it. And maybe that's a tension that we don't always name, because Jesus didn't go to the cross so we could have a meaningful service one day. It's done, it's over, move on. No. I truly believe that Jesus went to the cross to show us what love looks like. To show us how to live and to invite us into a different kind of being in this world, which means Easter isn't something we attend. Easter is something we carry. And I think that's exactly where these disciples are in this story, because Easter happened. It happened. And the tomb is empty, and the stone had been rolled away, and Mary saw the risen Christ. And the news is already moving around, already changing everything. And yet, John just told us, we just heard it, the disciples are still behind locked doors. They're not celebrating. They're not even proclaiming anything yet. They're not even quite sure what to do next. But they gathered together in fear. And what strikes me about that is not just that they're afraid, and it's not what they're going to do with that fear. They don't scatter. They don't run back to their old lives, at least not yet. They stay together. Because fear has a way of isolating us. It convinces us to pull back, to withdraw, to handle things on our own. But the disciples don't do that. They gather together. And not because they have all the answers or feel strong in any way. They gather because something in them knows that they shouldn't go through it alone. And I wonder how often How often that reminder that faith is not meant to be lived behind closed, locked doors. And it's not to be lived by ourselves. That even when we're unsure what we believe and unsure what is even going to come next in our lives, there's something so powerful about staying connected. Actually, about showing up, being there, about sitting in that same space literally or figuratively and saying, I don't have it all figured out yet, but you know what? I'm here. I'm here. Because sometimes that first step forward in faith isn't having that clarity. And I've talked about that over and over through Lent. But it's refusing to walk away no matter what. If we're honest, that might be one of the most relatable stories in the whole resurrection story. We love Easter, don't we? It's beautiful. The flowers are coming in bloom, and we just see there, and the music is just phenomenal. And the services leading up to it, it's beautiful. We love it. And it's not just for the moment itself, but it's what it represents. That declaration that death does not have that final word. But the question that comes right after that moment, though, the one we don't always talk about, is what do we do with it? Where do we go from here? Because you see, if we're not careful, we treat Easter like something we attended, something we celebrated for one day. And then quietly, we just returned to life as usual, as if nothing actually changed, nothing happened. I have to tell you something. The resurrection doesn't work that way. You don't witness life breaking through death and then go back to living as if nothing happened. At least, that's not what Jesus intended. Which raises the question, what does faith look like when the celebration is over? Think about that. And I'll go a little even further on that, I'll say. And raise the question, does life still feel just like life? Because the truth is, resurrection doesn't immediately erase the uncertainty. We still have everything there. And it doesn't suddenly remove fear or make everything clear. And even our disciples, they're locked in this room. But you know what? They know something happened. They didn't just know what to do with it yet. And maybe that's where some of us are today, wondering, what is she even talking about, right? And it's not because we don't believe, but because we're still trying to figure out what this belief looks like. What does it look like the Sunday after Easter? Maybe some of us are still wondering what it means to move forward. Maybe we're still asking quietly, or maybe not so quietly, what now? So what? We had Easter. It was great. But here's what I love about this moment. The disciples are locked in the room, right? And Jesus doesn't wait for them to get it together. He doesn't stand outside the door and say, okay, guys, when you get it all ready and get it together, come on out. I'll be here waiting for you. No, he doesn't do that. He doesn't say anything. He walks right in the room. He just comes on in, right into that fear. He comes right into that certainty, right into the middle of them not knowing. And the first thing he says isn't an instruction. And it's not even a correction. He doesn't even give them a plan. It's peace. Jesus says, peace be with you. And I think we need to sit with that for just a moment. Because peace in this moment isn't the absence of trouble. Because the doors are still locked. The future is still unclear. And yet, Jesus stands before them and says, peace. Which means this kind of peace isn't dependent on what's happening around them. It's rooted in who is standing among them. And that changes things. Because we spend so much time of our lives waiting for peace to come to change circumstances. We wait for things to settle down, for life to make more sense to us. We wait for us to have more control over the situation. Then we think, then we are going to have peace. Things are going to be different. But you see, Jesus offers something different. A peace that shows up before things are even resolved. A peace that meets us right in the middle of the unknown. There's even that peace that doesn't answer every question, but it does steady us enough to take the next step. And maybe that's what we need more than anything. Not an explanation, not even a perfectly mapped out plan, but enough peace for us to keep going. And knowing Jesus is still there. See, truth for many of us is we tend to think that the next step in faith requires clarity. Many of us need a plan to move on. How many of us look for confidence? At least a sense of that we need to know something about where we're going and what we're doing. But you see, the story just suggests something differently. And maybe that next step in faith doesn't begin with certainty. Maybe it begins with presence. Just showing up. With being willing to sit in the room even when the doors are still locked. And still trusting Jesus is going to meet us there. But you see, something else happens. Jesus shows them his hands. He shows them their side. He doesn't hide the wounds. And he doesn't pretend that nothing happened. He brings reality of the cross right there into that room. Because resurrection, it doesn't erase the story. What it does is it transforms it. Because everything we carry, experiences, losses, moments that have shaped us in ways we didn't expect. And sometimes we wonder if those things disqualify us from moving forward. Do you know about my history? Sometimes we feel we have to be more put together. More healed, whatever that means, right? But Jesus walks into that room and says, bring all of it with you. All of it. Did you hear that? Bring all of it with you. Because most of us are always carrying something, right? It can be something trivial, but it can be something major, something unresolved, something heavy, something we're still just trying to understand through all of this. And let's face it, how many of us have been taught, maybe in subtle ways, maybe a little bit more, to believe that we need to get things sorted, sorted out before we can really move forward? Oh, you can't bring that with you. What if people see that on you? But this moment tells something different. Jesus doesn't tell, once you're healed, I'll just send you out then. Take time. He meets them right there in that middle of that process and calls them forward anyways, right where they are, right where they're feeling, which means that our readiness is not the requirement, but our willingness is. And that's both challenging and yet, in so many levels, so many ways, it's so freeing of us to be just us, who we are. Because it means we don't have to wait for some future vision or version, I should say, of ourselves to begin. We can begin right here, right now, just as we are. And then Jesus says something that shifts everything. Jesus says, as the Father has sent me, so I send you. And I can just picture that room. I can picture those disciples. I can picture myself being in that situation saying, send us? What? Did you see us? We're sitting behind locked doors, Jesus. Come on. We're trying to understand what just happened. We're not ready to do anything right now. And maybe that's exactly the point. Being sent doesn't mean fully prepared. And I'm going to say it again. It means to be fully willing to go. It means taking just one little step forward. Not because you got it figured out, but because we trust the one who is sending us. And then we're told right then and there, Jesus breathes on them the Holy Spirit. Receive the Holy Spirit. And the Spirit comes like a breath, quiet, close, personal. Can you imagine how personal that must have felt? Personal, not overwhelming, steady, encouragement. Just enough for a conversation, enough for the grace of the moment, enough strength for what's in front of them. and not everything we need for the rest of our lives. But it's enough for us to take that step right now. And if we're honest, that can be frustrating for many of us because we would rather know we're all of it. We would rather know who's going with us, what we're supposed to take, where exactly are we going, what restaurants are going to be there. I don't know, that's me. Where are we going to eat? What's going to be there? We want to know that. But you see, having faith, understanding faith, it doesn't work that way. Because sometimes the only thing we're given is just enough to trust God for today. And maybe that's how we move forward. Maybe we just move forward knowing that little bit. Because even that little bit of certainty, we can't get it wrong. Because faith doesn't work that way in knowing it all. And more often it just looks like we just have to keep showing up no matter what. It may fail. It may look tiny. But we keep showing up again and again. And I'll say it and again. And that just brings us to today, Communion Sunday, a time when we're going to gather at the table. See, communion is what the church does after resurrection. Not as a finale, but actually as a continuation. We come to the table. And for many of us, and there's many Sundays myself when I don't have it all together. I don't feel perfectly ready. But you know what? We show up anyways. We come forward. And that's exactly why this table today means so much. Because communion isn't a table for people who have it all together. It never has been. Think of the Last Supper. It's the first time this meal was shared. The disciples didn't understand a word. What was going on? There was confusion. What's happening? And still they sat around that table with Jesus. And in a few moments, we're going to have that time at the table. And it's not that different from then. We're still leaning, we're still questioning, we're still trying to figure things out, and yet we're all going to be invited to come to the table. To receive, not because we've earned it, but because grace is given to us. To remember that Christ meets us, not at the end of our journey, but right in the middle of it. Just like in that room, just like that night. Because this table doesn't just remind us of what Jesus has done, it shapes us. It shapes us into the kind of people that we need to become. People marked by grace instead of judgment. People given forgiveness instead of those holding on to it. People being loved, especially when it's difficult for others to understand that. And the more that we keep returning to this table, the more that kind of life begins to take root in us. So as we gather this afternoon and this time that we have in a few moments to gather at the table, you don't have to have answers. You don't have to feel ready. You may simply just wonder what. But I'm asking you, all you have to do is show up. Because the resurrection isn't just something we celebrate, it's something that we live. And that sounds good. But what does that actually look like? Most of the time, it's nothing dramatic. It looks ordinary, just like the Monday morning after, right? It looks like choosing patience when you're already stretched thin. It looks like responding with kindness when it would be much easier to walk away or even just shut down. It looks like reaching out instead of pulling back, forgiving instead of holding on, showing up when it would be easier just to disappear, hoping that no one sees you. But that reflects a life shaped by something totally different. Because when resurrection takes root in us, it's not going to change everything. It's not going to change everything right away, but it's going to begin to change how we move through it. So when you find yourself this week in those ordinary moments, when it feels like everything's just gone back to normal, when clarity isn't there, when you're really not sure, well, what are we supposed to do now? What's the next step? Maybe that's not the question. maybe the question we should be asking is, am I living like Easter matters? Because we don't leave Easter behind. We carry it with us into the weeks after, times after. But we carry Easter into our conversations. We carry Easter into our relationships. We carry Easter into those ordinary moments that don't feel exactly sacred. See, that's where resurrection starts to take root. In the ordinary moments where we're tempted to overlook. Because following Jesus rarely begins with something dramatic. It begins with showing up again and again and again, over and over, and trusting that Christ is already there meeting us in the middle of all of our lives. We don't leave Easter behind. We don't. We carry it with us every day. Because when we do, the resurrection doesn't stay in a moment. It begins to take shape in us each and every day. Amen? Amen.